Hey everybody, it's Miranda here from Live with Prima, and I have a Christmas decor tutorial to share with you all today. I'm going to take you step by step on how I created this little altered Christmas scene in one of the carte blanche plaques, and I will have all the supply list linked down below so you can see everything I use. It's quite large, but I basically just pulled everything from my stash. So I'm using the reverse side of this wooden piece here, which I love. It's like a canvas, but it's made of wood, and these are so fun. I love these. It's a staple. So I'm using the back of it, and I wanted to finally use all of these scraps from other projects that I've been working on from the Sweet Peppermint line. I mean, I have a ton of scraps. What you see there is just a little bit. It's the ones that went with kind of the color scheme I wanted to go with. So I just pulled a few of those scraps out, and I'm going to use those up and just kind of collage them on there. I just don't like anything to go to waste. So you'll see a jump in the video because I really was just cutting pieces and collaging, and I didn't want to like show. It was such a long process, just picking the right pieces, and even though it's mostly getting covered up, I was pretty picky about, which ones I chose and which ones, how I used it and what I covered up. I wanted everything to kind of blend together nicely. So I'm just using the soft gloss gel, or the soft matte gel, excuse me, to adhere everything down. So there's the jump I was talking about, and you'll see another jump in a minute, but I'm basically just kind of showing you guys step by step without every, single detail, because it's going to take a while to cover your piece with all of these beautiful scraps of paper. So I am just placing them all the way around, making sure I get all of my sides really well too, and just going back on top of it with that soft matte gel. That is why I prefer matte gel, because it doesn't dry glossy. It's pretty transparent, opaque. You're not going to see anything shiny or, glossy. So I'm just taking different pieces and wrapping them around my sides and just getting the look that I'm going for. And then we're going to end up adding, mediums and gessos and tons of mixed media techniques. But this is a really great, mixed media background that's kind of like a go-to for most people, and it's really fun to do. So I am just kind of playing around with my placement here. You'll see me moving things around, and I'm being pretty picky for something that's going to get mostly covered up in the end, which I realized, but hey, I'm a picky person. I like to use the edge. I don't know if you noticed there, but I use the edge of that paintbrush, almost like a bone folder. I kind of used it to push that paper into the crease. So at the end there, I had some really pretty little pieces, and I wanted those to kind of show. I don't think they ended up showing a lot. In a couple areas I can see them, but I wanted to place those on top. So that is what I'm doing there, just kind of selectively picking the ones that I want to show the most and adding those to the top. And then I'm taking the Prima Distress tool and just kind of sanding off all of the edges that maybe the paper kind of overlapped or didn't quite line up the way I wanted it to. And then I'm going to take out my heavy gesso, and I'm going to use a little bit of the, I think it's called glazing medium from Golden, or Liquitex, I'm sorry. It just kind of, it's a wonderful medium for adding like subtle color. So I'm mixing it up with my heavy gesso, and I'm just going to kind of glaze over the entire piece. And it's a really fun way to just add lots of color without committing to that. So that looks really stark right there, but what you can do is you can take a napkin or a rag like I am and really wipe out most of that. So it's a really fun way to kind of add colors and mediums, and you'll see me playing around with that here. Just adding some and then taking some away, kind of going back and forth and doing that. And once I'm happy with kind of the glazing technique, I will go in and add a little bit thicker gesso. So I added just heavy gesso with my little Finnabair silicone brush, just heavier in some areas, and I really like the contrast. It really kind of muted the papers and let them all blend together, and you can always use that rag as long as the gesso is still wet and kind of pick up extra. So that's all I'm doing there, is adding some extra heavy gesso in certain areas. And the gesso also works as an adhesive. I had a strip of paper there, I'm not sure if you caught it, that was not glued down, and the gesso really helped adhere it perfectly. Okay, so that's how it looks when it's wet. And now I have a little mixture here, and I'm going to show you what I use. I use the platinum glass glitter, which is one of my favorites, and then I used 3D matte gel. And I can't really tell you the ratio. I would say just mix it until you feel like it's a good consistency. I am going to be using a stencil with that, so I needed it to be pretty fluid. But before I do that, I'm going to go in and I'm going to add a little bit of stamping using one of the coordinating sweet peppermint stamps just to add extra texture in the background. I'm just using some black archival ink. I don't want it to go anywhere. We're going to add wet mediums on top, so it needs to be a permanent ink. So I'm trying to keep things lifted up using those bowls there, so I had to kind of put it down on my table to stamp it and not have it wiggle around. But I'm just using, this stamp is really cool because it has like bells, it's almost like an advert in a Christmas magazine. So it's got some script, and then it's got some pictures and some price tags and stuff. So it's a really great stamp for adding texture, not even just for Christmas, just for any background. So I really like this stamp, and it coordinates with the Sweet Peppermint collection. I tried to use everything that coordinated with the Sweet Peppermint collection, which is just one of the most beautiful collections that Prima has released, in my opinion. I love it. So this is an older stencil, and the item number, I was trying to show it right there, but I'll have it listed down below. It's just an older stencil. You can use anything you have on hand, but I just like the design. I thought it looked kind of like ornaments. So I'm just scraping that little mixture across, and it went through really well. I really liked the consistency that I had here, and once it looks kind of milky and white and weird right now, but when it dries, if you've done this technique before or seen it, it looks absolutely beautiful. The matte gel dries clear and non-glossy, and it just lets the glitter, you know, kind of have the spotlight, and the glitter just looks beautiful. So add as much glitter as you can with it still being able to go through a stencil. So I'm just going all the way around and trying to scrape some of the excess off and not waste any product. And you don't see it on camera, but afterwards I'm pretty frugal, so I do a lot of scraping to get that excess off. And then I just use that spare gesso container to keep it in there, and I just use it when I need it. Okay, so I'm kind of showing what it looks like. Now I am breaking out my IOD oil pastels, and I realized that I use these same colors over and over, so I was determined to pull a couple of colors out that I do not typically use. The first one I'm going with is the ochre one, which I use all the time. It is my favorite oil pastel. It has just surpassed even Distress inks. I love it. So you just kind of do a little scratching right there with it, just almost like a lipstick kind of. That's the only way I can really explain it. You just kind of like smear it on there like lipstick, and I'm using the aqua brushes that go with like the watercolor confections, and I am just using that to spread that water soluble oil pastel around and get some really cool colors. And I'm kind of if you're wondering what my pattern is, I'm kind of going on the edges of the papers, and it's hard to see what is raised and what is not raised on the camera, but I can see it in person. So I'm just kind of going around the papers that are raised. And I'm using some blues, and then you're going to see me use some pinks and some purples and some colors I wouldn't typically use. And that's the beauty of this paper collection, is it has so many wonderful colors in it. So I didn't really fast forward this too much. I really wanted y'all to see just like the process. It's pretty fun and quick, and you can really add a lot of color this way. It was really fun for me. I enjoyed this process a lot. So, and this is all water soluble. If you feel like you have too much, add more water, wipe it away. It's pretty easy to work with, and it's not so scary, I guess I should say, as opposed to a lot of the other inks and stuff. So I'm using a pink there that I don't typically use, and I just absolutely loved it. I thought it looked really pretty. And, you know, I kind of wanted to do a traditional wreath was my inspiration, just doing a traditional wreath. And how I ended up doing this, I don't know, but I had intended on just doing a wreath with some beautiful Prima flowers, just making a really pretty wreath. But in the end, I decided that it needed a home to sit on. So I kind of made a little scene with a Christmas tree and a fireplace, as you'll see in just a second. So I'm taking the Wild Raspberry Color Bloom 2 spray there and the Dragonfly Blue Color Bloom 2 spray. Those are two of my absolute favorites, especially the blue one. And I'm just tapping the nozzles and getting some splatters. If you hit that with something hard, you're not going to have a lot of splattering everywhere else. Now, my favorite color bloom of all time is definitely the Frost. I love the opacity of it. It's very opaque, and this is almost gone. So what I decided to do was just pour it on there and just kind of use my finger and let it spread and let it, you know, blend in with some of the oil pastels if it wanted to, and just kind of let it do its thing. It made it look very snowy. It made it look very Christmassy. Add a little bit of water if it's too strong, and I'm just kind of letting it drip and do its own thing. And it just really ended up kind of tying everything together nicely. I really liked it. I love the Frost Color Bloom spray. It's definitely my favorite, and that's kind of silly because you think, oh, why you could use gesso, but this Color Bloom spray is just, it's awesome. It's really cool. So that is what we have so far, and I didn't add paper to the back until the end because I knew I was going to have a lot of things you know, touching the back. So to make my wreath, I'm using a spoil of ribbon, and I got this idea off Pinterest. I cannot take full credit for this idea part. I saw another tutorial where someone was taking ribbon spools and making little canvases. So that is what I am doing here, and I'm just painting it with gesso. It gets covered up, but I like to just be sure that everything is going to be covered, just in case. You never know, you might have a spot showing, and I don't want it to be like that brown chipboard type ash gray color. And I'm taking the fabric pack, and I have just started getting into that. I'm taking the gauze part, the cotton gauze, and I am purposely cutting very jagged little strips of this. I love this stuff. I don't know what took me so long to start using the fabric, but Robbie, she's on our design team, she has really inspired me to break out the fabric. She does the most amazing work with fabric. So thank you, Robbie, for the inspiration. If you missed the Christmas tree she just did, it is breathtaking. So I'm cutting strips, and I'm really distressing them, and I did more distressing off camera than I show here because I really distressed the edges of all of this paper. I mean, all of this fabric. Boy, I'm just tongue-tied tonight. So I'm cutting all of these lengths in half, and then half of those get cut in half again. And you'll kind of see what I'm talking about as I go along. And all I'm going to do is I am tying it one time like a little knot, and then I'm wrapping it around one more time, and then I'm tying a bow. So that's what I'm doing with the long pieces. I'm tying a little knot, wrapping it around, tying a bow. Okay? Not worrying about how pretty it looks. I'm going to kind of use glue to get it to stay how I want and trim away any of those excess ends that look a little too big. And then I'm cutting the other ones in half, and I'm alternating between the smaller ribbons and the bigger ones. And this just came naturally. It just seemed like the right thing to do. And that is the end result. You get a few that are a little too large, so I cut those down. But we're covering all this with our Prima flowers. So I've got my Gracie vine there from the Almanac collection, which is my favorite. So I'm going to wrap that around very well, and then I'm going to use 3D matte gel to adhere that down to it. And I wanted to share a tip you'll see me do in just a second that I have found really helps me when I'm altering things and waiting on glues to dry and things like that. And 3D matte gel has become the adhesive that I use for everything. I love it. So I'm going to add that here. And I'm just being pretty generous and pushing. I think I only adhere in like 2 or 3 places. I want the vine to still move, and I want the leaves to still be able to move, but I just don't want the vine to go anywhere. So I cut off all of those little black flowers. So here's my tip. Using clothespins, and you You might get them stuck a little bit sometimes, but it's not too bad. They come off pretty easily and it holds your vine in place perfectly while that glue's drying. All right, I have had this Shabby Chic Treasure in my stash since I was on the Inglewood Balm design team like 2 years ago, so it was time to break it out and use it, and I couldn't think of a better time. So I broke it out here, and I'm going to add some little things on top of the mantle. I was going to go all out and do stockings and ornaments, but I don't know. I just felt like it was going to be a little bit too much. So I am just going to add this, and I do add some little star ornaments in the bottom, but I'm using some 3D foam strips. I actually found these strips at Michael's. So they're just like dots, the 3D foam dots, but they come in these long strips. So I'm cutting them in half, and then I'm adding them to the back because the bottle sticks up and the clock that I'm going to add sticks up, and I want everything to kind of be even and not look like the fireplace is recessed more so than the item sitting on top of the mantle. So I am just adding my foam squares here, and these are a little difficult to get off. I definitely prefer like the Artisan tape, but it just didn't have the dimension that I needed. So I'm just sticking it on there with that, making sure it's nice and secure. And I want to add one of those vials from the Memory Hardware line, but I wanted to fill it with some Christmas bling, so I'm going to grab my little palette knife and just add some glitter down in there. And it took me a while. I need one of those little baby funnels or something because it took a little while to get the glitter down in there, but it looks so pretty shining, and on top of the mantle it just looks really pretty. And I added a little bit of 3D matte gel when I put the cork in, just so that way I knew it wasn't going to spill and that it would dry and that cork wasn't going to pop out at any point. So I'm using 3D matte gel. Again, it dries clear, so it is the perfect adhesive. So before I add my clock piece, I'm making sure my light post, which is another one I've had in my stash forever, it's finally time to use it, and the perfect time. And I'm using a, let's see, I can't think of the name right now. The bottle caps right here. These are a staple. I love the bottle caps, the mechanicals from Finnabair. So I'm using that as like a frame for my clock. It's you're not going to see much of it but the edges. And then I just add one of the little Inglewood Balm clocks on top of it, and it just serves as like a little frame. So I'm just holding my wreath up there and seeing kind of where I want to place it. I'm using some of this jute here. I believe the color is called Bubblegum. Again, I will have the links all listed down below. But I'm just tying this up in a pretty bow, and I am doing it with double the amount of string, not like a 1-layer bow. I'm doing 2. Okay, so I've got some pieces here that are left over from a frame. It broke during shipment, which was fine with me because I love doing things like this. I love using little random broken pieces and fragments of resins, especially big, large frames like this. I'm sure you guys know which frame this came from. So I'm just using the Artisan powder, and that's the French sage. It's so beautiful. It's the most beautiful green. It's a very muted green, and it's not too bright. It's not lime. It's not too traditional. It's just like the perfect one. So that's what I'm adding, and you can see the difference there. And I'm going to adhere that using the 3D matte gel. Like I said, it is my go-to adhesive these days, so it is pretty much what I use all the time. I have been converted to the 3D matte gel, so it's just something that I love to use. So I'm just using my finger to go around the bottom. I don't want any excess glue poking out. And I use my fingers a lot on small pieces like this, and then I use the palette knife for bigger embellishments. So just adhering everything down. And I love this Junkyard Finding right here, or Shabby Chic Treasure, either one. It's from the Inglewood Balm range, and it's an older one, and it is just so beautiful. I love it so much. And I just felt like it made it look so Christmassy adding that there. So I'm just adding those broken pieces of frame just wherever I see fit. I did color all the rest of them. Didn't do it on camera for time purposes, but I did do it off camera. So I'm just adding them all now. I think I add 3 That's it altogether. Maybe 4, I can't quite remember, but definitely 3. So these are the mechanicals that I'm using as ornaments, and these are the IOD, I think they're called metals for plaques, and these are the new keyhole molds from IOD that are amazing. Oh, I love them so much. So this one I had to cut down a little bit because the design on the top I didn't really want it to show. But those molds are a game changer. If you're not going to get any molds out of the release except one, get the keyholes because they are amazing. So I'm grabbing a couple of different size stars there just to kind of, like I said, I wanted to do stockings and ornaments, but it was just a little too much. So I just decided to add a few stars down there under the fireplace like they were ornaments. So that's what I'm going to do. So I'm taking that 3D matte gel and I'm putting it in just one of my little handy dandy palettes so that way I can kind of close the lid and I don't have to worry about forgetting it, which I have done before and ruined an entire tub almost. Well, a good thick layer of it. So I'm adding that IOD metal there, and it's like a keyhole, and I love those. And then I'm going to add the other keyhole on top of that too. But for now, I'm just going to add my little metal mechanical stars. I love these so much. And they're very small, and you'll see I struggle a lot like there. I dropped one and then I couldn't find it. And it was right there anyway. But I should use tweezers for something like this. I bring it on myself by trying to use my fingers for everything. But I love that the 3D matte gel holds things immediately. It's a really great adhesive for that reason. So now I'm going to go ahead and adhere my wreath down before I add the flowers. I figured that would be best because I need it to adhere flat on the back, and I was afraid if I did the flowers first I wouldn't get a true contact with my reversed carte blanche plaque. So I'm kind of pushing it down there, and where you see the bow tied now, I do end up moving it. So I'm taking that little paper clay piece and I'm adding the new Antoinette pink, another one of the Artisan powders that is maybe my favorite. This one may be my favorite. This color is so beautiful. It's like a vintage pink. It's beautiful. So I'm using this one and I am just going all the way around it. And I just did it on top of my heavy gesso lid there. No big deal. It just like is a multi-purpose little platform for me. So I'm adding it on top of that other keyhole. So things get covered up a lot in my work, but it's all about layers and having fun and things peeking through. You can see the metal a little bit in the background. That's all that matters to me. Okay, this is the chipboard and more. It comes with these beautiful sequins, these chipboards that have sticker backs, so they're already adhesive, and the adhesive is really strong. So I'm sticking that Christmas tree in there, and I'd kind of hoped it showed a little more. And I know the wreath is completely oversized in comparison to what this scene would call for, but I really just loved making a really large wreath because that's ideally what I wanted to do, was just make a wreath. So I had to. I know it's like large in scale and does not match at all. But hey, maybe somebody has a wreath that is like, 2 times bigger than the fireplace. You never know. So I'm adding those little sequins just wherever I see fit, just kind of dipping them down into the 3D matte gel and adhering them all over. I really love these sequins. They're not super shiny like the other memory hardware ones are. They are a very, I can't explain it. They're just a subtle shine, almost like an opaque mica powder shine. I can't explain it, but they're not very metallic at all, and I really liked how pretty they looked. So I'm just adding those all over, just randomly, no rhyme, no reason. I did center one on the clock piece, and I think I centered one on the light poles, and that's pretty much it. And now I'm going to start adding my beautiful flowers to the centers, or to my wreath. So the centers of these flower bundles, I wasn't crazy about the little part there that you can kind of see. To me, it kind of looks like a cactus. So I trimmed it off camera because it went everywhere. But you can see the difference there. I don't like that little excess bundle. So I trimmed that off, and then I used gesso just to kind of whiten the center, and it just made it tie in a lot better for the look I was going for. For some projects, that centerpiece doesn't bother me at all. But for this one, I wanted to go ahead and trim that out. And these flowers are an older collection, but they just got re-released because they were so highly demanded. They are the prettiest flowers ever. They're so beautiful. So I'm using some of the sweet peppermint coordinating flowers, and then also some of these pink and blue flowers from Tales of You and Me and the Salvage District line. I love these. These are my all-time favorite flowers. The ones I'm using here, these pink ones and blue ones. I love them. I love the shape of them. They're so beautiful. So again, the supply list will be on the bottom in case anybody wants to get their hands on it. There may be some more out there somewhere, but they are just so beautiful. The shape of these flowers, just, I love them. They're beautiful. And then I guess the bundled roses, besides vines. I mean, if we talk about vines, of course I'm going to pick the vines, but so I'm just kind of going around here and adding flowers, and I decided I wanted to use an odd number of those flowers. They say to work in odd numbers, so that's what I'm doing. That's something I've learned from a few other gals. I guess I would say for the professionals, is to work in odd numbers, and it really is pleasing to the eye to have 3. I can imagine putting 4 of those blue flowers on there. So try to go with like odd numbers. That's my suggestion. It really does work, and it's very pleasing to see. So I'm just adding those, and every single petal on those flower bundles, they're all stemmed, so you can really manipulate that flower and get it to fit whatever you want, and that's the beauty of it. And then as soon as I have that one on here, basically I'm going to clip this little bow off to the side because it's just kind of getting in the way and I don't want it to get glued down. And I am just going to start filling in with all of my different flowers. I think I ended up only using a couple of the sweet peppermint ones. I have one there with the sequin in the middle, and I think I used like 2 or 3 more. But those beautiful older collection flowers were just so pretty, and they matched the colors so perfectly that I just loved them. So I ended up using those quite a bit, and they have a good variation in the packs of like different colored blues. Like that, you can see that pink right there is a lot darker than the one I just placed. So it's really fun to have a nice variety of colors and shades. So I'm just filling it out the best I can and then going in with some of those sweet peppermint flowers and adding those in. I love that one right there, that script one. It's so pretty. Okay, so that is pretty much it for the wreath. Now I'm grabbing some of those new wooden alphas that are beautiful, and I am just gessoing them with my finger. I use my fingers a lot. I'm sure you guys have noticed that by now, but I'm just adding a really thin layer of gesso with my fingers. I only took one. And I'm going to use some mulberry flakes to really, at first I was thinking I wanted it to look like a candy cane and do stripes, but I was like, oh, that's too much trouble. I'm adding one of those little, another one of those chipboard pieces, and it's foiled, and it looks so beautiful when the light hits it. So those chipboard pieces are just so amazing. So I'm grabbing my mulberry flakes here, and what I'm doing is I'm adding a little bit of the 3D gloss gel that I have in my palette, and then just pouring that mulberry mica powder on top. And you'll see here where I guess I just ended up changing my mind. I kind of liked it sporadic like this, but in the end piece you can see I just ended up covering the whole thing. So what I did is I dipped the entire thing in 3D gloss gel and then just poured the mulberry mica flakes right on top of it. So here you'll see me do something a little different than what the finished product is. And that's just because I changed my mind and forgot to turn the camera back on. I always leave things for at least one night and come back to it to make sure that I am happy with how it turned out. And that's a really good tip I could share with y'all. I mean, there's been plenty of times I've changed things completely from one night to the next, or you could get frustrated with a project and not know what to do, and then come back the next day and you have clarity. So anyway, this is basically it. I hope that you all like my project. I wanted to do one more Christmas project before the season was over. I hope everyone has a wonderful, wonderful holiday and a wonderful new year, and enjoy your time with your friends, your family. My last step here is just watering down gesso, and I'm using a fan brush, and I am just tapping all over and getting some really cool splatter effects and dripping it on some of my frame pieces and just, you know, getting some contrast. But that is like usually my last step. That's pretty much always my last step, is to splatter white gesso, and it's just really fun. So anyway, have a great Christmas. Thank you guys so much for watching, and have a wonderful day. Bye, y'all.